Good evening to everybody who is following this webinar from many parts of the globe. On behalf of the organizers of this webinar, namely the League of Arab States, Tunis office, and No Peace Without Justice, I would like to welcome you all, and in particular the high-level panelists, starting with His Excellency Ha'el Al-Fahoum, the Ambassador of Palestine to Tunisia, Dr. Heikel El-Mahfouz, Professor at the University of Carthage, Tunisia, and the expert on the ICC. He was also, I have to mention, he was a candidate to the ICC. A strong welcome to Dr. Richard Falk. Richard's participation in this webinar is an honor to all of us. He's a well-known professor and expert. He was the former UN Special Rapporteur on human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories and the Professor Emeritus of International Law at Princeton University. He's joining us from Turkey. Welcome to Joseph Shekla, coordinator Housing and Land Rights Network from Habitat International Coalition. Habitat International Coalition.
Thank you, glad to be with you.
My colleague Alison Smith, she's director of the International Criminal Justice Program at No Peace Without Justice. My friend Shawan Jabbarin, who is the general director of Al-Haq, and a prominent human rights defender who spent many years in jail in Israeli prisons. His Excellency Ibrahim Makrishi, he's the permanent representative of Palestine to the UN in Geneva. And of course, I have to thank His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Salah Ben Isa, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the League of Arab States, for his opening and for his collaboration in this webinar, which is organized by both of us. This webinar is organized, as I mentioned, by the League of Arab States, Tunis office, and No Peace Without Justice to celebrate the International Day of Innocent Children Victims of Aggression. In 2021 only, more than 70 children were killed in Palestine by the occupying power, Israel. And according to Defense for Children International, TI, since 2000, more than 2,194 Palestinian children were killed. And Israeli crimes are ongoing in total impunity despite the General Assembly and Security Council resolutions and also the Human Rights Council resolutions. Despite the condemnation by the Human Rights Council of Israeli violations against Palestinians and even despite tens of commissions of inquiry established by the Human Rights Council, and last one was decided on 27th of May 2021 as a consequence of the Israeli aggression on Gaza. The
أستاذ فريج صوتك بيقطع لو تركز على الميكروفون.
occupation is a nightmare since 1948.
فريج ثم بروبليم دو سون.
سيد فريج صوتك لو تركز على الميكروفون. لا في صوتك صوتك.
أستاذ أكثر؟
تو خير من قبيله، تو كي قلت لي في الترجمة واضح.
أوكي الآن مسموع الكلام؟
أستاذ فريج سامعني؟
تو مسموع.
أنا سامعك أستاذ أكثر.
تو مسموع.
أوكي. Okay, حواصل. I was saying that the daily life of Palestinians under the Israeli military occupation is a nightmare since 1948. And the dream of all Palestinian generations since 48 is to live in peace. I believe also that Israeli people has the same dream. Including the Israeli people. أنتقل الآن للتحدث باللغة العربية.
I'll move now to speak in Arabic to say that the hope for the Palestinian people and all peoples are aiming for peace is with the ICC. And on this topic, we will have our discussion today with a group of experts and specialists on human rights, and also the international humanitarian law and international relations and the international criminal law. And also I would like to mention Professor Richard Falk, who will speak to us about the apartheid, some information for our work. Of course, you have interpretation in Arabic and English, and also for those who wants to follow up in Arabic, go down to interpretation, Korean and English, of course, English. Each speaker will have 10 minutes, and also you can ask your questions on the chat panel below. I will open the floor for the experts to answer the questions at the end of the session. I'll give the floor now to His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Saleh bin Isa, Deputy Secretary General and President of the League of Arab States Tunis Center, for the opening and welcome remarks. Please. Thank you, my colleague Faraj Finish. Good evening, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished experts and professors. Allow me, first of all, to welcome you all on my own behalf and on behalf of His Excellency, the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Abu al-Ghait, to express to you my warmest thanks for your participation in this symposium and webinar on the International Criminal Court and the Israeli violations against the Palestinians, for which the Tunis Center is honored to organize in partnership with No Peace Without Justice organizations in a period not far from the anniversary of the International Day for Innocent Children Victims of Aggression. I would like also to thank my colleague Faraj Finish, the regional representative in the Middle East and North Africa for the No Peace Without Justice organization, for his valuable contribution in organizing this webinar. There is no doubt that the topic of our symposium and webinar comes down to a regional and global political context in which we are all looking forward to new horizons for the Palestinian cause that restores hope for its solution in accordance with the principles of justice and equity and international legitimacy. Under the work of the ICC that I have seen a few hours ago, the sworn of oath of Mr. Karim Assad Khan, and also, as you know, the decision of the pre-trial chamber of the ICC issued on February 5, 2021, recognizing the territorial jurisdiction of the court over the situation in Palestine, which extends to the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem as a state party of the Rome Statute, is an important turning point in the course. This decision is an important turning point in the course of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This decision came after the prosecutor of the court, Ms. Fatou Bensouda, admitted since 2019 that there is a reasonable basis for launching an investigation inside Palestine, and that war crimes could be committed in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, noting that the jurisdiction of the court pursuant to the Rome Statute extends to the most serious crimes defined by public international law, which are the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crimes of aggression, in addition to the issue of settlements in the Palestinian territories, which is also of the jurisdiction of the court. It is useful to recall here that Palestine's accession to the Rome Statute in January 2015 was accompanied by the declaration of the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court over crimes committed in the Palestinian territories on June 13, 2014. Three questions were put to pre-trial chamber one to establish the court's territorial jurisdiction. First, Palestine is a party to the Rome Statute as a result of its recognition as a non-member observer state in the United Nations since 2012, and as a member of the Rome Statute. Palestine can refer to the file to the court of the existing situation under Article 13 of the Rome Statute. Second, the territorial boundaries of the jurisdiction of the court are not the border of the state of Palestine, which is the sum of the occupied lands based on the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, announced in several regulations of the United Nations General Assembly, especially Resolution 19/67, in which it recognized the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the right to independence within a state on the territories occupied since 1967. Third and finally, the chamber considered that the Oslo Accords, whereby the Israelis are not subject to the criminal jurisdiction of the Palestinian authorities, have no effect on the territorial jurisdiction of the court. It is self-evident to mention that the topic of our webinar is of different and intertwined dimensions. We lost him. فقدنا الصوت. And I'm certain that your familiarity with all aspects related to it, given your locally and internationally recognized competence and specialization, are all factors that will enable everyone to benefit from your experience, shed light on the problem at hand, and refute the speeches against the jurisdiction of the ICC and investigative work expected from them. I wish you success of your work and our webinar, and I would like to renew my thanks to you. I pass the floor now to my colleague, Mr. Faraj Fnish, to take over the moderation and facilitation of this symposium. Mr. Faraj Fnish, please, you have the floor. Thank you again. Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, which have exceeded the opening of the session to the deep inside the topic. Directly, we would like to go. I would like to invite His Excellency Dr. Hail Al Fahoum to talk about the political situation after the aggression and war and recent war on Gaza, and what are the developments and his analysis on the recent development and the relation with the new American and US administration now, which is going on. Please, you have the floor. Please open the mic.
سامعني هلا؟
ممتاز.
اوكي. شكرا دكتور.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed Saleh bin Issa, Deputy Secretary General and President of the Arab League States Tunis Center, Your Excellencies, participants at this important webinar, may peace be upon you. At the beginning, allow me to convey to you the greetings of your people, your friends and brothers who are on the land of Palestine from Jerusalem, and the residents of Jerusalem who are well enrooted on their ancestors' land, where they highly appreciate your efforts to support their resistance and the struggles of their people, their legitimate and also with the state of Palestine and it, as Jerusalem, its capital. The continuous crimes of the Israeli occupation against the Palestinian people and to cover all the Palestinian life without including the settlers, militias, and also their aggression and crimes and their provocative aggressions, and to expand the settlements by the extending the settlements building as they have now in Beta and southern Bethlehem, Hebron, and the Jordan Valley, and also the Judaization process to continue the annexation of the Eastern Jerusalem, and also to change its aspects and impose their authority on the holy sites, and also their apartheid and the cleansing process, also to empty it from, evacuated from its residents, as happened in Sheikh Jarrah, Salwans, by the methodological destruction of the Palestinian presence and the humanitarian presence, as well as other practices that are targeting the Palestinian presence. All this in the ugly the occupation aspects, and also it leads to one objective is to increase and enroot the apartheid regime, also to enroot Israel as an occupation state and also apartheid state based on the cleansing, ethnical cleansing. Also, the Palestinian people has proved during the last aggression he's a resistant population, and also very hard to break them, and also resisting against the force of occupation and killing. And also, so the last and the most important victory achieved, which is the unity of the Palestinian people with its aspect on the field and in the geography, by breaking all the chains of the division that were imposed to it, and it unified its struggle and intifada against occupation in all areas. and it also sent important and strong messages to everyone that the Palestinian people is unified to restore its rights against an racist occupation that does not distinguish, where they thought that the new generation, especially inside the Green Line, have forgotten their national identity and their belonging and their loyalty and their historical and values and Arabic and humanitarian values. And they used all the possible tools they have from other superpowers to achieve this, and they failed. This unity that is characterized by the unity and of our people, we have to use it and consecrate it for the Palestinian national action, also by putting on priority the national goal that the factions should be forgotten, and also to strengthen the national front, working on a one action plan, a unified plan under the umbrella of the PLO, the only and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people that restored and preserved the Palestinian identity against all attempt. The recent aggression proved that the Palestinian right is a humanitarian international right, and also a proof entrenched of the justice and equality values, which was seen on the popular movements that unprecedented that we have seen in the United States, UK, and most of the European countries, which we should build on it and also invest in it actively to enhance the force of the popular pressure on those people which have strengthened the practices of the occupation forces and its institutions. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear brothers and sisters, now it's time that the international community should take its responsibility with all its institutions and structures and honor its responsibilities to end this injustice in history. And it is a shame and unfortunate that we, at the 21st century, we still have an occupied country and a structure that is occupying another country with the support of other countries that they claim they have the equality, justice, and rule of law values. And also what those countries can do is to recognize the Palestinian state as a first signal and sign to show the occupation that the world cannot neglect anymore, and also the occupation crimes, its apartheid and racism policies is a proof of what the remaining of the United Nations resolutions and also the values and slogans we have seen and also declared by President Biden and his Secretary of State, and also for adopting the two-state solution and also to stop the unilateral solutions. We reiterate the importance of the activating the Arab process by unifying the positions and vision based on the Arab peace initiatives to establish for peace in the future, and also to continue working together and jointly with the Arab regional and international communities also to stop the policies and the measures taken by Israel. Palestine is the topic of peace, the title for peace and stability in the region, and it is the only basis for the all regional and international peace. No peace, no security, no stability without a real peace and the national solution. And with all this, it's time for the international community to forget the strategies of neglecting the people and population, and also they have to move to respect of people and stop wars, and also with the real achievements and partnerships for an international and regional system based on the cohabitation and partnership between all population of the region. May God bless our martyrs, and also we wish all quick recovery for our wounded people. May peace be upon you. Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador, for this intervention and this great analysis of the situation that we are seeing and witnessing after the attack on Gaza. We move on to the topics, technical topics, to understand the importance of the ICC resolution. And based on this, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Haikal bin Mahfoud, the Professor of Public International Law, and also the experts in the countries in crisis, and also an experts on Yemen, Iraq, and also we would like to ask him what is the legal framework for the ICC jurisdiction on Palestine in this context. Dr. Haikal, you have the floor. Thank you for good friend Fridge. Allow me to greet and to thank all those to the Arab League Tunis Center and His Excellency Mohammed Saleh bin Isa, and also No Peace Without Justice, for giving me this invitation, for giving me this opportunity, and to thank all participants and those people here who are participating at this webinar. I would like to speak within the time frame in 4 main topics, and also to the first one, maybe some signs concerning the Rome Statute, and also the trial of perpetrators of international crimes. The ICC, as we all know, has the right to have to refer the perpetrators of international crimes, and also or parties, the court, the ICC has given the jurisdiction to see in those crimes. So when the national jurisdictions are not capable or not willing to, for example, Palestine, the state of Palestine is a member state of the Rome Statute, and also in February also they accorded the jurisdiction of the ICC on the Palestinian occupied territories, fully including the Eastern Jerusalem, and also since 2021, the prosecutor of the ICC announced the opening of an investigation on Palestine. Also, the preliminary investigation of the ICC shows that the first investigation, independent and investigation within the material jurisdiction of the ICC, and also the prosecutor's office decides to start the trial, and also the first step is that now they have to inform and notify all member states, and that the ICC is using its jurisdiction and the investigation it's conducting on the situation. And also the Rome Statute requests the ICC to expand the investigation to all proofs and evidence, and to prove that if this responsibility is individual, criminal, and also within this framework, the prosecutor can investigate on the incrimination and of those crimes. Within this framework, we cannot, or the court cannot justify the political aspect of the crimes, and it has the responsibility to continue its investigation with in its decision of 5th of February that this jurisdiction also it could be political, and also, but the judges cannot backward when they face facts that could be based on political disputes, but they are legal cases. As for the actions committed recently, and also its legal consequences, also, of course, the court will focus on those crimes, and also I would like to mention here some of the crimes that can be covered by the investigation and the expansion of investigation. First, in those crimes against humanity, which are crimes defined that could be committed by a large-scale aggression, whether methodological or within the policies of the state against the civilians population. There's a crime of apartheid and discrimination according to Article 1D of the Rome Statute, and also one of the severe crimes according to international law. Also the discrimination and apartheid crime also is also stipulated by the Rome Statute, and this crime is composed of three main components. Also, the willingness to impose a system, a regime, and the methodological aggression committed by a group of people against other one, and inhuman actions committed at a large scale or methodological. So I will not get into details of those crimes, but it's clear that Rome Statute did not give more details about this, which is a methodological system. What we see, on the other hand, we see that most of the Palestinian territories, Israel is practicing the unilateral authority, the main authority, main power, besides the Palestinian autodetermination or authority, or the Palestinian Authority has limited the power in the life of people, and there is a discrimination against Palestinians in the laws, policies, and declarations. This affects also the life. Also, beside this, there's also the crime of evacuation and the deportation of the Article 3 of Rome Statute. And this is also has taken several aspects, several dimensions on the decision, and also and deprive people from their right to leave their country, their patrie, and to return to their patrie, and also the issue of the property of lands. Also, they cannot be seen except in a very limited or narrow, without any moral legitimacy. Also, here the ICC has to investigate in those actions in a very moral dimension imposed on the Palestinian people at the Eastern Jerusalem, as well as the random attacks and aggressions and the excessive use of force by Israel, and also which is against the international humanitarian law. The war crimes committed also by the random excessive aggressions and also the destruction of properties, and also attacks against civilians who also within this framework, there are attacks against the journalists and the media centers and media offices. And also we know that journalists and the media is protected by the international laws. There's also the issue of the aggression. The actions taken during the aggression is a crime of aggression according to Article 8 of Rome Statute, regardless of the procedural system of the aggression in the Rome Statute. Palestine is a state according to Article 12.2a of Rome Statute, and here it puts it in as a member state, Palestine, and also the term of state is according to the general principles regulating the state. And also this is what we have in the decision that we have mentioned. Therefore, the term state also for this state on its territories, it has to be explained and interpreted according to international general law, and also to see if some aggressions are considered and also target the state according to Article 8 base of Rome Statute. What are the possible measures if I still have 2 minutes? I have 2 minutes, if you allow me. 1 minute, no, 1 minute, 1 minute. Okay, in 1 minute. So the options that we have for the current situation in Palestine and also the recent aggressions, the prosecutor can launch investigations immediately according to available information to the court if they have also the willingness and intention to start investigation. Also, we can have, but the current option is to expand the investigation of the crimes under investigation now, because most of the crimes now under investigation are concern the war crimes, while there are some information and no doubt that there are crimes against humanity and other war crimes that have been committed against children and women. And here this gives the opportunity and possibility into more investigation and to check more questions on the jurisdiction that we can have at that time, and also to see the time, the cases, and the issues are very complicated, and we have to have responsibility and patience so we can restore justice for all people who have been affected by those crimes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Heikel. Thank you very much. You gave the legal framework of Palestine. أنا معاك الآن. I would like to invite the professor to هل الصوت كويس الآن؟ والله زي الوضع في تونس ماشي. طيب I will move
صوتك دائما كويس، بس التكنولوجيا بتخربش.
ساعات التكنولوجيا تخربش شوية أستاذ شعبان. I would like to invite Professor Richard Falk. Richard, in 2017 you released a famous report on Israeli practice and the question of apartheid is a crime against the ICC. May I ask you if apartheid is the correct term to apply in the case of Israel, and to what extent the at
عيد
and
عيد عيد سؤالك عيد سؤالك للبروفيسور فولك. مش
okay.
مسموع، ما كانش مسموع.
Okay, so Professor Richard, can you hear me?
I had a little trouble hearing you just now. Now I hear you clearly, but just
Your voice is very weak. Can you?
oh, my voice is weak.
Yes.
Do you hear me now?
نعم.
Is that clear?
ما هو الصوت عندي ضعيف.
Is that okay?
لكن هل الصوت كويس هيك؟
Let me.
طيب. So it's okay. Can you hear me, Richard?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes, good. So I have two questions. I said that in 2017 on Israeli practices toward Palestinian people and apartheid. And my two questions are: is apartheid the correct term to apply to the case of Israel? And to what extent I can look at this crime?
Thank you very much, Fresh, for your kind words. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel and greet the distinguished participants. Let me make a preliminary remark before addressing your questions. And that is that in the Palestinian struggle for basic rights, there really are two battlefields. The battlefield that we think of is the material, behavioral confrontation of opposed forces. But equally important is the battlefield that I call the legitimacy struggle, or the legitimacy war, in which the prevailing side controls the moral, legal, and spiritual dimensions of the conflict. And the ICC recent decision is an extremely important victory for the Palestinians in this second legitimacy level of the conflict. And if you look at the outcome, who controls the political results of anti-colonial struggles, you will find that it is not the side that is stronger on the material battlefield, but the side that wins the legitimacy war. Every anti-colonial nationalist self-determination movement was weaker militarily than its adversary, and yet prevailed. We haven't learned that lesson, that these symbolic victories are of extreme importance in shaping the political outcome. Now, apartheid is so important, in my view, for two reasons. It is the crime that encompasses all the other policies and practices that Israel has developed to expand and complete the Zionist project, and it also is the source of the oppression of the Palestinian people in the most comprehensive sense of the word, including the people not under direct control, but the refugees, the Palestinian refugees, and the people living in exile. Secondly, so it's the basic core crime of the Israeli whole pattern of practice. But the second reason that it's crucial is there will be no sustainable peace without the dismantling of the apartheid structures and practices. And that's we can learn that from the precedent in South Africa. There was no possibility of establishing a coexistence between Black Africans and the white minority without dismantling apartheid and establishing a multiracial constitutional democracy. So for those two reasons, it's fundamental. It's absolutely fundamental. And until a few years ago, it was seen as an extreme kind of allegation. But in the last 4 years, that has changed, and apartheid has become part of the mainstream discourse on the future of the relationship between Palestine and Israel. And you referred to our 2017 ESQA study, which caused a fury in the Security Council. I call it the best unpaid publicity any report has ever received in the history of the UN. That really helped people begin to discuss apartheid and look for themselves at what these patterns of practice and policy add up to, and that basically confirmed our academic study. But then, in addition to that report, this year, two further confirmations of the allegation of apartheid were made by very credible mainstream NGO actors. One in Israel, B'Tselem, the most respected NGO in Israel, came to the surprising conclusion that Israel was guilty of the crime of apartheid, not only within the 67 boundaries, but also as applicable to the occupied Palestinian territories. Our report, it's important to contrast that report and also the third one, which is the Human Rights Watch exhaustive 200-page report that also confirms the fundamental allegation of the crime according to the International Convention on Apartheid and the Rome Statute itself was committed. The Human Rights Watch report and the B'Tselem report relate the crime of apartheid to territory. Our report for ESQA related the crime of apartheid to the Palestinian people as a whole, and that includes the refugees and involuntary exiles. We felt that was the essence of the Israeli occupation policy, was to practice a politics of fragmentation, to separate the Palestinian people as much as they could in order to weaken their resistance. And it was artificial, in our view, to exclude the refugees who've been denied their international legal right of return. And so it's a very important conceptual distinction. Do you think of apartheid in the Israeli context as applicable to the Palestinian people, even though in the South African context it was applicable to territory? It was thought of as limited to the territory of South Africa. As far as the ICC is concerned, there's no question that it has the jurisdictional authority to investigate this crime. The question is, will it have the political will to do so? and it faces tremendous invisible opposition already for its decision on February 5th that's been referred to investigate crimes subsequent to 2014 in occupied Palestine. The ICC may be too timid at this stage in its institutional development to take on this core crime. And it's a matter of tactics whether the Palestinian Authority or Palestine should pursue this by submitting the allegation. I think it is important that it do so, but it's a question of judgment as to whether it might so overwhelm the ICC that it will decline the investigation altogether. So the Palestinian people have already won a substantial victory, and the question is, should they jeopardize that victory by pressing for the inclusion of apartheid in the investigation? And this will, of course, challenge the new prosecutor who's just taken over the job, and one doesn't know how he will proceed. So in concluding my remarks, I would say that apartheid used to be seen as an extremist allegation against Israel. But the important development that cannot be overstated is to have normalized the allegation of apartheid as part of the dominant discourse on the conflict. And at this point where, after the 11-day assault on Gaza, there's a lot of rethinking of how to understand the future of the conflict. And it will become clear that an increasing global solidarity movement, together with Palestinian resistance, will create a kind of South African situation. And the question is whether that will exert enough pressure on the Israeli leadership to recalculate their own interests and to face the fact that they can't have peaceful coexistence without abandoning apartheid and dismantling it. And that would be, of course, a great step toward peace and justice in the region as well as for the Palestinian people. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much. Really, thank you very much for this very interesting analysis on the apartheid policy of Israel and the lack of political will at the international level. Let's move to Joseph Shekler, who is from the International Habitat Coalition. And I would like to ask Joseph, and you are feel free to speak in Arabic or in English, Joseph. Richard talked about fragmentation policy of the people of Palestinian people, fragmentation, as a mean to weaken the resistance of Palestinian people.
Yes.
Do you think that expropriation policy in Israel is also part of the objective of Israel?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Fresh, for the introduction, and thanks so much for the invitation. Of course, I'm very happy to be join here with His Excellency Mohammed Saleh bin Isa and all the dignitaries. This is a very important question, and it's very close to our hearts. What I think answers the question is both well, it's a combination of factors. Of course, we're talking about fragmentation that's being done in very open methods and means, by house demolitions, by population transfer, but also by institutional means through the parastatal institutions of Zionism and the state ideology of the State of Israel. I also wanted to just focus a little bit on the question of where things start, because frankly, a lot of the mainstream media in the most recent conflict have focused on Hamas rockets, as if for some reason those are the cause of the conflagration. And also a little bit about what Professor Falk has mentioned about the legitimacy of the struggle. On the 11th of May, when the most intense exchange was taking place, Israel famously announced that it was going to bomb the Kennedy residential tower. But by that time, much unannounced Israeli destruction had already taken place. And the Palestinian Health Ministry had announced that Israeli airstrikes had killed at least 28 Palestinians across the already long besieged Gaza Strip. Previously, Israel had already confirmed that it had attacked Islamic Jihad fighters in another residential building that apparently housed some kind of Hamas office, although that was very vague. And after the Israeli strike on that building, the military wing of Hamas announced that it would unleash a barrage of rockets at Israel. However, Israeli forces, including its judiciary, had caused the demolition of 383 Palestinian homes and livelihood-related structures in the occupied territory since January, which is on track to meet or exceed the rate of 854 demolitions in the pandemic year of 2020, mostly in Jerusalem and Area C, affecting 520 Palestinians. So that early May peak in Israel's Operation Guardian of the Walls reportedly followed numerous Hamas warnings throughout that day, telling that if Israel had proceeded to hit residential buildings, then Hamas would retaliate with unprecedented force. And that's in fact what did happen. And of course, there were several other statements that reaffirmed that Palestinians have in fact a right to respond. Abu Ubaidah of the Qassam brigades reminded that it should be expected to see Palestinian armed response to Israeli attacks on Palestinian civilians and houses in Jerusalem as a precedent. He was echoing the GA Resolution 1514 of 1960 and subsequently reaffirmed with respect to Palestine, citing the legitimacy of the struggle of the peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial domination, apartheid, and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. Already on the 5th of May, Voices in Gaza asserted that the struggle of national unity was the character of the response, and warning that no one would sit idly by in the face of attacks on Sheikh Jarrah. And of course, there was lots of reference, including from the commander of the Qassam brigades, that there would be a heavy price for aggression against the people of Sheikh Jarrah from Gaza if that aggression did not stop immediately. And he was speaking on behalf of the Palestinian people as a whole, as he said, comprised of Christians and Muslims, in its land from Galilee to the Naqab. There's obviously an attempt to defragment the Palestinian people. That this latest conflict, of course, of targeting homes, continued to the destruction of 2,000 units in Gaza and partial destruction of another 15,000 homes, leaving 70,000 Gazans displaced and, of course, fragmented and separated from the land. But this is only a snapshot, an exercise in reaction to one of the latest atrocities committed against the Palestinian people as a whole. Therefore, I'd like to address two broader issues relevant to the ICC's jurisdiction in investigating potential crimes committed in the OPT since 2012. And one of them is, of course, the dilemma over the temporal limits of the court's investigation, that is only since 2012. And the other is related to the ongoing nature of crimes defined in the Rome Statute. And it addresses this question that you asked about fragmentation. While it's generally accepted that war crimes and crimes against humanity are subject to no statute of limitations, customary law rule 160 bears this out with respect to war crimes, as does the explicit Convention on Non-Applicability of Statutory Limitations to War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity, which the State of Palestine has ratified already in 2015. At the present, understanding of great breaches and gross violations of human rights, and particularly from the perspective of restorative justice, means that such offenses, crimes, and abuses remain in process, at least until reparation has been made. One of the significant developments of ICC over previous tribunals is its two-track remedy for recognizing victims of Rome Statute crimes, the reparations that may arise from prosecution, as well as the various forms of reparations extended through the voluntary fund for victims, which is not always money, it's often rehabilitation and other forms. This is a great advance over the international military tribunals at Nuremberg and Tokyo, for example, with their singularly retributive justice approach, where victims did not have a voice. But with regard to Rome Statute's Article 7 on crimes against humanity, one of the clusters of prohibited acts amounts to the crime of apartheid. And even some critical Israeli voices have, of course, concluded that this crime is ongoingly committed by the State of Israel, even if only restricted to their view of the occupied territories. The elements of the crime, however, include the perpetrator being aware of the factual circumstances, its conduct in the context of an institutionalized regime of systematic oppression and domination by one group over others, and or part of a widespread and systematic attack directly against civilian population, and or the perpetrator knowing that the conduct is part of or intended to be part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against Palestinian population. And these conditions are addressed, of course, in the history, but in the case of Palestine, the crime of population transfer, which is, of course, essential to the fragmentation of Palestinians with its push and pull factors, was already being codified and eventually prosecuted as both a war crime and crime against humanity following World War II. But Israel's Zionist public institutions and armed cohorts were plotting and perpetrating the very same crimes within their growing sphere of influence in Palestine, including through governments, government bureaus in Western capitals. And despite the emergence of international humanitarian law prohibitions, this violent form of spatial segregation and fragmentation of the Palestinian, indigenous Palestinian people has been carried out as military doctrine since 1948. Now, long before the current wave of international recognition of the term apartheid, there have been plenty of diverse Jewish authors and Palestinian scholars who have revealed these methods, especially the state ideology in the state ideology of Zionism and its parastatal institutions with their apartheid charters. And to them, we have to really attribute our understanding of the crimes of apartheid and population transfer, because they didn't start in the last 4 years or even in the last decade. So I'd like to just share a lesson or some of the lessons we learned around the experience of the fact-finding mission on the Gaza conflict, that is the Goldstone Commission, and its follow-up in 2009. One of them was the array of potential effective measures that could be taken by states to bring an end to the illegal situation and to protect the Palestinian people without resort to new resolutions or mechanisms. But of course, none of those mechanisms have been used until now. Another lesson was that, especially for us in the Housing and Land Rights Network of Habitat International Coalition, was the inextricable link with the recent developments with the long and systematic pattern of deliberate population transfer through targeting homes, shelters, and shelter seekers during the Operation Cast-Lead and in the context of Israeli military practice. That was actually the title of our submission to the Goldstone Commission. And that inquiry led us back to the 10th of March, 1948, and Israel's Plan Dalet, which instructed military operations against enemy population centers. This is completely contrary to international humanitarian law. It called for, quote, destroying villages, setting them on fire by blowing them up or planting mines in their debris, especially those population centers that are difficult to control continuously, unquote. And again, quoting, mounting search and control operations according to the following guidelines: encircling of the villages, conducting a search inside them, and in case of resistance, the armed forces must be wiped out and the population, the entire population, expelled outside of the borders of the state. So beyond the clearer breaches of legal principles of proportionality and distinction, a train of official Israeli statements related to the events subject to the ICC review help us to understand the often elusive criterion of intent. And in the recent UN Human Rights Council special session, its resolution provides us with a complement to the ICC's function. And I just want to end with this. There are 5 important respects of this resolution. One is that it forms an ongoing commission of inquiry whereby the council means to maintain that inquiry without being bound to a specific endpoint. 2, it explicitly calls for the inquiry not only to investigate all violations and abuses taking place in the occupied territory since Ramadan of 2021, but also to identify underlying root causes of recurrent tensions, instability, and protraction of conflict, and also to identify patterns of violations over time.
Joseph,
Yes.
if you can conclude, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So it also addresses the systematic discrimination and repression based on national, ethnic, racial, or religious identity. And it calls on the Commission to collect, consolidate, and analyze evidence where possible to identify perpetrators, including those, not just individuals, but also enterprises, so that it covers both natural and legal persons. So this scope is significantly broad to address crimes and gross violations conducted by both individuals and organizations. the ICC's affirmed jurisdiction over individual liability for crimes is encouraging. However, in light of the probability that the ICC's investigation may never result in a trial, such parallel mechanisms may be even more effective to ensuring the accountability that the Human Rights Council has long been seeking.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much for this analysis. Let's move to the civil society organizations and their role with regard to the ICC. And I would like to ask my colleague, Alison Smith, who is the focal point within No Peace Without Justice for the ICC. And she was involved, she has been involved for many years in the support to the ICC from the beginning, and now she is member on behalf of No Peace Without Justice of the International Coalition of for the support of ICC, and ask her to tell us a little bit about the role of civil society in compliance procedure within or before the ICC, how to manage, what can we do as NGOs, as civil society organizations in that particular issue. Alison, please.
Thank you very much, Frej, and the excellencies, fellow panelists, colleagues, friends. It's really a great pleasure to be here with you all today, and I thank very much the League of Arab States for working with us to organize this event. Deeply appreciated. I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that I'm sharing some reflections on the role of civil society in complaints before the ICC and on in the proceedings before the ICC from the perspective, obviously, of a non-Palestinian NGO. So it's entirely possible I will miss out something that is very relevant and very important to Palestinian NGOs. But fortunately, with Shoan here, I look to you, Shoan, to supplement the remarks I make if I do leave anything out, and if I do, I'm very sorry in advance. The other preface remark I wanted to say was, as we all know, civil society is very diverse, and particularly when we're talking about civil society engaged in the work of the ICC, we get even more diverse because we have organizations from all over the world. And we have different mandates, we have different expertise, we have different interests, we have different cultures, we have different legal backgrounds. And so there's a big mesh, let's say, of different kinds of expertise and different interests among civil society, broadly speaking. And at the same time, civil society has different roles to play at the different stages of the proceedings at the ICC. And so different civil society will play different roles at different times, or some roles and not others. But I put everything together for the sake of not speaking for 5 hours. So broadly speaking, the proceedings before the ICC encompass a number of stages, as we all know. So first the preliminary examinations, then investigations, then pre-trial, then trial, then appeal, and then reparations in the event of a conviction. Of course, there's various things can happen along the way that means we don't get through some of the stages. But fortunately, in the situation of Palestine, at least, we've made it past the preliminary examination stage, now into the investigations. So we are off to a good start, I would say, in that respect. I will focus on the role of civil society in investigations and reparations, so in those two stages, because they're, I think, two stages where it's the easiest, in a way, entry point for civil society, or where there is a hands-on practical role to play beyond, obviously, advocacy towards the court in terms of taking a case up to begin with, which has happened with this case. I would say, however, civil society has played a role during the preliminary examination stage in the case of Palestine, in terms of submitting information to the Office of the Prosecutor about crimes potentially within the jurisdiction of the court, and also through amicus briefs on the legal question that was mentioned at the beginning of this session about whether the court had jurisdiction in this situation, and if so, with what geographic scope. And a number of civil society organizations, including No Peace Without Justice, and also including Al-Haq in different briefs, submitted amicus briefs to the court to assist the court in considering this question and to assist them to make that determination. That doesn't always happen. It's not always possible to have that kind of input, but we were given that possibility in this situation. Now, in terms of investigations, there's a number of different roles that civil society can play while the court is undertaking its investigations. One thing that the civil society can do is to continue providing information to the Office of the Prosecutor, as they're able to do before an investigation is opened, relating to either past crimes, ongoing crimes, information that may be useful to assist the prosecutor in carrying out those investigations. Sometimes this can involve the use of what are called intermediaries, so civil society that has a specific agreement with the court to provide specific kinds of support, be it linking up with potential witnesses or other kinds of support. That's a very complicated area, and I'm not going to go into it, but it is a role that civil society can play. Civil society can support victims in applying for recognition as a victim before the court. And I believe Shawan is going to talk about that a bit, so I will only leave it at that. And I would say that civil society can help the court in terms of discharging its responsibility to conduct outreach. And when I talk about outreach, it's not just providing information to the victims and to the affected communities, but receiving information back from those communities. So building a kind of understanding and a flow of information between victims and affected communities on the one hand, and the court on the other hand. I would say on that outreach is, of course, primarily the responsibility of the court, and indeed primarily the responsibility of the registry within the court, but civil society can help the court carry out its outreach mandate, including by making sure the messages that it wants to give are messages that will be heard and received on the ground. And then moving to the reparations stage, and as I mentioned, this will depend on whether or not there is a conviction at the trial stage, and then of course confirmed on appeal. And the reparations can take place, as was mentioned, in two ways. And one is a reparations order, which is what happens when a person is convicted. And the chamber can make an order for the person to pay reparations to victims, and that, as I mentioned, the victims who have been recognized as such by the court in a particular case. And there's also the assistance mandate of the Trust Fund for Victim, which Joseph made reference to in his intervention. And that, as he said, is not necessarily monetary reparations, but it can be a range of other things, including the provision of medical support, psychosocial support, building schools. I mean, there's a number of different things that can be done depending on the country in question and depending on what is needed in that country. And the role that civil society can play during this phase, either the reparations phase and when the trust fund is implementing its assistance mandate, is first of all making submissions in respect of reparations. And there was a call recently issued for submissions in respect of the case of Dominic Ongwen in Uganda, who was just convicted recently. And so seeking information about what would be appropriate, what are the cultural aspects, these kinds of things. And on the other hand, civil society can be implementing partners and advisors to the Trust Fund for Victims for the assistance mandate. So often what will happen is the Trust Fund for Victims will conclude agreements with civil society to implement specific programs rather than carry out those programs themselves, which it can be a bit complicated, but is the right thing to do since the Trust Fund is not an expert in medical programs or other things like that. Finally, I just wanted to say one thing about a broader role of civil society in respect of the court. So not in respect of any specific proceedings before the court, but the role of civil society in holding the court to account to its founding statute and to its guiding principles. And this is an important role that civil society plays broadly with respect to the courts. When we look at its policies and procedures, undertake advocacy for how we think the court can improve its impact, improve its positive impact, of course, and how we think the court can discharge its mandate more effectively and more efficiently. And this is something that civil society from around the world does, and we often do in coordination with each other. And one example of that is advocacy that we've been all doing together for longer than I would like to say on outreach. And I keep coming back to outreach, particularly in the Palestine situation, because of the order of the court while there was a preliminary examination going on, ordering the court to conduct outreach in Palestine, which my understanding is that didn't really happen, but Shawan knows much better than I do and can fill you in on that. But this is one part where civil society, for example, keeps pushing, keeps asking, and eventually we hope we get some results in terms of improving the work of the courts and improving the positive impact they have in situation and examination countries. And I will stop there. And thank you very much, Frej.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you very much for your presentation, which is very important. And I think we have a lot to do in terms of civil society organization, international, local, national, regional, a lot to do with regard to the ICC, not only on Palestine, but in many other countries like Yemen, Iraq, Libya, Syria, etc. شاوان سأحيل لك الكلمة. أعتقد أنه الموضوع واضح جدا.
Shawan, I give you the floor now. I think it's clear now.
أستاذ شعوان جبارين.
Thank you, Mr. Shawan Jabbareen.
دور المجتمع
will speak on the role
الضحايا، مساعدة الضحايا
of the NGOs in establishing the truth in protecting victims and helping victims. I lost his voice. We lose Fred's voice.
كصديق
And
وكرفيق.
also Shawan as a good friend.
حق مؤسسة رائدة.
He is of the
نتعلم.
Palestinian Human Rights Organization Al-Haq.
كلمة لك شعوان.
The floor is Shawan. Thank you, my friend Fred, for your nice words. And I would like to thank Dr. Mohammed bin Saleh bin Isa, and for the Arab League and the Tunis Center for hosting this webinar. And also greetings to all the friends and ladies and gentlemen here. And also thanks to No Peace Without Justice. I will get out of the frame and the discussion. And I would like to say, to get into the practicalities more than legal framework, Palestine is a test and hard test for the international law principles, and it breaks the rules. So that's why now Palestine is moving in the international scenes, and also so because this exposes the ICC was a hard test, the Human Rights Council another test, General Assembly another test, but I think until now we just we succeeded, as Professor Falk mentioned, in talking about the legitimacy and the moral dimension and the legitimacy in this aspect. Let me say that the topic, frankly, for the ICC, yes, I will not take long. I just want to say now the preliminary test, we succeeded despite all attempts by Israel. Israel has mobilized politics and heavy political weapons, and we say, and fronts. They tried with so many countries. And I think now that it's a shame for some countries. They have contradicted their principles according to the ICC, especially Germany. I would like to mention, and also in Germany, they charge them with the responsibility of this. They have some, some corridors behind the back doors, and also they have the positions of other countries, of Brazil, like Trump position. So this is one thing. The other thing, before joining the ICC, countries were pushing on Palestine heavily. British, they said, we would like President Abbas to go and vote in the General Assembly. For you, we are voting for you, but give us a floor, for 25 years. This silly aspect some countries were discussing in their pressure again on Palestine. So everyone wanted to have his or her own Palestine. Why? The reason is Israel. This is the reason. I think now it's disclosed. It's uncovered. That's why you see now it's a real test for all the international humanitarian law principles. And the second thing, each step taken by Palestine is a shocking rule for them. Now we talk about apartheid. You cannot discuss the apartheid in the ICC except in Palestine. I would know, 2 days ago we had a meeting with the General Attorney and her team and her office. We discussed with her, frankly, but the important topic, and this was from our side, the scope you are looking at this, is the war crimes or the crimes against humanity? They said crimes against humanity, including the apartheid, everything, all aspects, all topics, all crimes. So like such things, the international humanitarian law is being tested now in Palestine. So all this, they are all on Palestine. Now, for example, in 1976, after the two annexes, there was no, except in 1999, 2001. So this leads me to the main topic. I think there was a highly professional topic which was supported by international friends, lawyers, that has restored this direction. But the decision of the pre-trial chamber left the door open. It did not mean that the Oslo issue has been closed. No, it was kept half open because it's your right to defend yourself, to defend that it has no jurisdiction Oslo or not Oslo, until you are come before the court. This is a defense. So that's why the preparation for this in a better way with quality of your work, this is important. So you should not sleep on this now. It's over with the decision of the pre-trial chamber on this issue. No, this will be present later on in the trial. We have to push on it because we all know what are the strengths and what we have, and also that there are mentioned in all interventions that we worked on. The second thing I would like to mention here, even the outreach was an unprecedented. The ICC requested the registrar to conduct the outreach during the pre-trial. This has never happened in any other case, but I'm not getting I'm not telling a secret when telling that the Israelis and the back scenes of the ICCs, one of them came to the Israeli embassy and told some friends, and I think Alison knows, he said, what did you do? The French judge, why did you do this? They told him, no, don't worry, there will be nothing. The registrar or the secretariat of the ICC, they called us with all the teams, with outreach and the office. They said, we have to explain to them what's Palestine. They don't know about Palestine, what it is, where it is, the size and the geography. And we went, we organized 2 days with them. They said we would like to meet in Amman. Then they extended. We told them why. They said, no, we have no money, we have no money, until we met with the registrar of the office. Then we had a hot discussion. Then they said they did not real explanation and analysis. What do they mean by outreach? So you see, imagine at this level. So they have to tell the ICC how to think. So I think the success was in 2 issues. The first one is the outreach and the focus that this is a technical issue, this is highly professional, this is legal. You cannot only have just slogans and speeches and declarations and also and the rhetorics, but you have to work on it good. And so with the support of so many friends in the world for this issue, this was one thing. Now the role of the Arab League was also important when they submitted, with its weight, and also, and we may know what we mean. Also, they were always mentioning what, of course, there are some countries, Israel tried to politicize the ICC, but I said the Arab League, and the number of its members was so, and their calculations, they said they have submitted a paper of friend for, but now the important thing now in the practical situation we have plays an important another role. And the other role is to discuss with the member states like Egypt to facilitate and simplify the role, the work of the investigators of ICC to enter Gaza. I think this is very, very important. In the previous phases, the investigators, they were trying, the ambassador Ibrahim knew what were the obstacles and difficulties they faced with the investigators. Where you want to go, you have to ask Qatar and others. No, but I think today, now, the Arab League can play an important role in 2 directions for the investigation committees and also to influence and pressure on the victims and the institutions to move on, to facilitate their movement. And when I say this, this is not a secondary. No, I say this is not secondary at all. This is an important and basic role. You cannot allow the victims from Gaza to go from Gaza to West Bank to Jordan, no, and the movement towards Egypt, it's very hard, very hard. It's unfortunate to say this, but those are issues. We can work on it and we can pressure on it and discuss it and reach solutions. As for what now, how to deal with the issue of victims and information. Frankly, this issue is very wide issue. We are preparing ourselves, and the ICC, of course, it has to be in the scene of the crime, the crime scene. But we want to take them outside. Now the technology, we have technology, IT communication, we have lots of possibilities, and they are adopted and approved by the investigators, international investigators. That's why we don't worry about this. As for talking about institutions that have long experience in this aspect, they coordinate between them. We are not in a competition, but we are complementing and supporting each other for the court. This is, we are betting on that for the success. I'm not worried about this. Israel will do all its possible means to block this. I don't want to imagine what would Israel do. They threatened to kill, and the past 2 days, I received from the IT personnel that I had an email was fake, but we know how to get out of all those circles. The other thing, what the investigation committee will do with the UN Human Rights Council will be important to support the investigation. I'm not in my name, but I'll talk about Israeli sources. They call themselves ICC insiders. And they say that Palestine has signed a memorandum yesterday with the state of Palestine signed a memorandum with the ICC, an MOU. So this is what they call, this is advanced. This is what the Israelis say. They say that now the prosecutor at the last moment, last minute, when you put a key in the lock and you break it, so to give them a trouble. So this is what they say. I don't know, I will stop here. I don't want to get into more details, but this is the information that we receive. We have enough information, power, energy. We have, the will, we have, intention we have. So we need solidarity with high cooperation from the other international organizations, good friends. Professor Falk also has an important role in the apartheid. Other rapporteurs, right, in the UN. Also, it was one of the topics that we were depending on in our legal discussions. Therefore, so everything, all effort, I think, has its place, and we appreciate it. We highly appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shawan. Thank you for this. I wanted to ask you, are you optimistic or not? But you are optimistic. So all the work, all the efforts and sacrifice, of course, will be paid for. We hope to see it in the practical results. And also, I wanted to ask another question. Your message to the world since a few weeks on the aggression on Gaza, you said no peace without justice, and no justice without accountability. Yes, this is what I would like to mention. The Ambassador Ibrahim Khreisha, our last speakers, on the efforts you conduct at the international level and the international mechanisms for the issue in relation with the ICC and the accountability. Dr. Ibrahim, yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and friends and colleagues. And we heard valuable interventions from different speakers. And before I start, I would like to express my thanks to Mr. Mohammed bin Saleh and the Tunis Center for the Arab League and the No Peace Without Justice. And also I wanted to add what you mentioned, and yes, no justice without accountability. This is the effort now that we are working on. for everybody, whether official parties or civil societies, even Palestinians and Israelis in all parts of the world. Maybe there's a delay of the Palestinians to take the legal track on the Palestinian cause, but now we are on the right track, especially now that Palestine has the status of a state since 29 November 2012, which gives us the possibility to join several conventions, agreements, and organizations, mostly the ICC, which I think now we are off with the two main phases, which is the of the time and the material, and also now we have the legal jurisdiction also, but we still have so many complications, but we have without politicization, but we have to see, we have to think. I think now the criminals are, we hope to see them facing the justice, international justice. Me and my colleagues in the different phases of the international system, we are working on defending the Palestinian cause, everyone in his or her field. We're in New York at the Security Council, General Assembly, or The Hague with the ICC, and also International Court of Justice. Also, there's a case on the Vienna case agreement, also the transfer of United States of its embassy to Jerusalem. Now we are using the possible different mechanisms of Human Rights Council, as my friend Shawan mentioned, on defending the Palestinian cause. And it would be useful to mention the important role of the special rapporteur now and the previous special rapporteurs, especially our dear friend, Dr. Falk, and others who have taken this responsibility, as well as the previous special rapporteur, whether they work jointly or individually. Also, we did benefit from the contractual mechanisms. Now we are in 2017, we submitted a complaint committee for the elimination of all discrimination, and in 2019 we managed that the committee to approve the jurisdiction of the committee in its work in Palestine after the occupation authorities refused this. After this, we have mentioned that we are working with lots of specialized organizations and institutions. We are trying to introduce the legal track with also the international, the ILO is submitting a report on a field visit of a specialized team on the violations of the Israeli authorities against the Israeli workers and laborers. There's a report submitted by the Director General of WHO based on field assessment, and also they submit a report, annual report on the WHO. This was before the voting on the resolution. Also, there are different tracks, whether in UNCTAD, which is the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which is where we have a unit from Palestine, where we submit regular reports on the losses of the Palestinian people. And the UNCTAD mentioned that the last 20 years, Palestine lost some $50 billion because of the occupation. Now we are working with them, and through the new Director General who was recently appointed, this requires more efforts to conduct a study on the Palestinian people losses, personal and private and public, since the Israeli occupation. This is a huge project. We will start with what we do at the Human Rights Council and other partners. Now, there are special resolutions submitted every year, and recently it was in March. We have 3 resolutions on the settlements and one the autodetermination, and the important resolution for the accountability. And unfortunately, so many countries are still voting against this resolution or absent, but we are still requesting and insist on the accountability in all disputes all over the world. As my colleague Shawan mentioned, the Palestinian causes now is disclosing or exposing the international community. There's a regulation that rules the world with the international law. And we are now working with the international law and international humanitarian law. According to this international law, unfortunately, sometimes we see, and we are in contact with some colleagues, that they are, they feel embarrassed now on, for example, the high-level political decision. They say, it's not our decision. We are convinced 100% with you, but it's the political level. This is the problem. And here, this is embarrassing for those countries that claim that they are defending human rights, and they claim that they are leading the free world. And also, if you lead the free world, you have to enforce the law. Otherwise, here we have to mention, 2 days ago, I was talking with one of the colleagues from Europe, that Israel, in the way that they are dealing, makes Israel a state above the law and beyond the legal system, the international legal system, and tries to reverse the concepts for Israel, starting with the Uruguay Convention on the concept of state until the resolution of Human Rights Council. If you continue with this way, you will make of Israel a phenomenon, and the phenomena won't last. Now we are aware of this. We want Israel to be there, but we want Israel to be a state that respects the law and its international commitments, and to honor and respect this, and to end all those violations. And I think the greatest violations is occupation by itself. Therefore, we hope that there will be an attempt with the new U.S. administration, and also the Russian president also can have this. This can enhance or strengthen the international legal system after the disaster of the past 4 years with the Trump administration. This with all what we had, whether in Israel. So to have something new now in Israel, but the indications until now, we hope that it will be different. But the world now is in a different atmosphere, and now in Israel, not what happened in Gaza, the roots of the conflict. This is one of the main issues that we ask from the facts-finding mission. They started with the Israeli continuous violations and the methodological violations. Of course, in Gaza, there's a suffering, but with the whole Palestinian people in the West Bank, Jerusalem, settlements, and trying to deport families in Sheikh Jarrah and others, and the aggression against, on prayers, while praying, what happened with Al-Aqsa, all this formed this situation. And also this case now, they sent a message to the whole world that Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, inside Israel, and in the whole world are unified. And they have their Arab brothers and all free people all over the world. Therefore, as Mr. Shekla mentioned, that this is an important phase. And explain this. Let me remind you that this resolution is to investigate all violations within the human rights in the territories of the state of Palestine and Israel. The other thing, the COI should be ongoing, and this is an important element. We hope that the President of the Council should start working with this, despite all technical difficulties, and while Israel did not allow them. So we worked on different issues at the Human Rights Council. I know it's late, I have to finish. We hope that also to mention the role of the civil society organizations and the important role with the international community to ask or request the international community or the parties or the third parties. They have a responsibility according to the Geneva Convention, the four conventions, the first and second article, to work together on the necessity to respect, to take certain measures, practical measures, or they say according to the rules of law, according Article 142, 147, and 149 of the Geneva Convention. The other issue is the NGOs can help us with the database that we're still. Yesterday we had a meeting with the group of the Islamic Cooperation ambassadors and also the commissioner. We asked her to give us a response, a written response. Why the delay now to renew this list? There's a list of 116 companies, enterprises, but on the violation of those companies, also with the working group of those companies and human rights, so we can pressure on those companies on the importance to respect the international law. I have to stop here. Thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Ibrahim, thank you. I wanted to ask you how many staff you have in Geneva while you are doing all these huge efforts with more than 15 international organizations in Geneva. How many staff you have? Do you have enough staff? And the Al-Haq, I wish when my people are staff, we have people who are at the Al-Haq. So the number are 4 and 2 admins. I'm working with you. One of them is in another room following up other issues. 44? We hope that you will have 14. Not, we have 40 and you have 4, so this will be 44. But with all your efforts, of course, we are in direct contact with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have a great team. They contact us with serious work at different levels. And our team at The Hague and in New York, we are in continuous contact with the Arab League and with everybody's efforts. I think that the future is for us. We want them to be with us. But if they cannot do it now, it will be too late. Thank you, thank you. So my question was to salute all the people who are working with you. I know them. Oh, I know them all. I know their work. They work more than 40 hours, if I can say. Yeah. Maybe we can ask Mr. Shawan to give you some of his, to exchange expertise. Okay, now we still have 3-4 minutes. There's a question from one of the participants, Mr. Hussein Bouchiba from Tunisia. He says the jurisdiction of the ICC on Palestine is important, but at your assessment, what are the legal and procedural mechanisms at the international level and at the Palestinian Authority level to see the war criminals and those accused of serious violations of human rights in Palestine to be before the international justice. Can I ask Mr. Shawan to answer? Thank you. This is a long question. This is a big question. No one can have a right answer. When to see them? Of course, if we do not see them, as maybe our children, as our children, maybe. There are lots of mechanisms. One of them is the international legal jurisdiction, but also the policy is leading, the political will is leading them. And we saw that Spain, Belgium, Germany, but it happened. There are the changes in the procedural laws and the regulations, and also we are trying to knock on all doors in this aspect. But I have one important issue for the, the issue of the Security Council. Now the U.S. administration can use this to show their friendship with Palestine and friendship with Israel. Let's say, let's go and get another resolution from Security Council, delay this for 1 year, and they repeat this 1 year after one. This will delay this. We should not get into this trap. And we have the political leadership now is aware of this, and also to follow up with the ICC to show our political will. We are not putting all our eggs in one basket, but the ICC now is one important direction or destination for us, and also the companies. Yes, today I hear about the normalization in Tunisia, but Tunisia can go to another law that is related to, you have it, for example, tenders law on this direction, so we can put and stipulate that no company should be accepted in bidding if they participated or contributed to the violation of the international law. I think this is scary. This will scare some companies, whether they are in Tunisia or elsewhere. Also, the Arab League, also, they have taken that, but it was not respected by member states. So this is an issue I think is easy. We can contribute. Everybody can contribute to it. So the occupation is not an army, is not military or weapons, but this we have to break their power. Thank you, Shawan. I give the floor now to Mr. Muhammad Saleh bin Isa to close this session. I would like to ask if you have any comment or anything to add from our experts or speakers. Richard, Alison, any comment? If not, I will give Heikel, please. Just a quick comment on the accountability and just we are looking at this in the horizon. I think one of the things that we have to work on it as an international community and also with all organizations is to enhance the role of the ICC, especially at the level of the cultural, geographical diversity in the ICC system and regime. I think the decision that is committed that they would use the two assistant prosecutor, and also one of them will be from the civil law system, and it will have it reflects the cultural diversity of the Arab region. And also you mentioned that Libya, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Sudan, Palestine, of course, and also to enhance the cultural diversity of the ICC, and also the implementation of Rome Statute also, so that the international jurisdiction would implement its jurisdiction. Thank you, Dr. Haikal. Thank you. May God bless you. So now I'll give the floor to Mr. Muhammad Saleh. Please, Your Excellency. Just quickly to mention that Dr. Haikal, he conducted a competition to be a judge at the ICC, and he reached the last phase when they shortlisted at 2. And I think he succeeded with all aspects. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shawan. Thank you. Mr. Muhammad Salah, please. Thank you. Well, thank you, my friend. Yes. Okay.
مع سيدي أنا أقول سفراج ما هاتش.
So I would like to say, Mr. Fraser, about this rich topic and all the interventions from all the friends. I would like to express my thanks and gratitude for their contributions, for their valuable contribution. Of course, all interventions showed the different aspects of the topic that we have tackled from different dimensions: legal, political, security, and humanitarian, even in the discrimination aspect. That will lead, I think, to enhance the vision of the basis and the content of international humanitarian law, that what happens in Palestine, as our colleague Mr. Shawan said, is a test for this international humanitarian law. Personally, I am convinced that all the proposals, analysis, suggestions presented by you will be very useful to contribute to shed the light on the Arab and international opinion on the size of the severe violations committed by the Israeli occupation forces against the Palestinian people's rights. And also, I think it will contribute to help the ICC in conducting its task to the best, as we hope, especially the role of the civil society in providing information, directives, and their flow between the civil society and the ICC, as you mentioned, as well as the role of the civil society in helping the victims also. Also, we are full of hope that this webinar will contribute in support the mechanisms of pressure on Israel to stop their commitment of violations that are condemned by the international law, and also to ensure the enough international protection for the Palestinian people, and to face at the same time to face the campaigns against the ICC and its jurisdiction. And also, in light of all those topics, we have to join efforts to invest this decision and resolution, decision of the ICC, and also its results for the best way to join the efforts, international solidarity with the Palestinian people, and also especially the position of the European Union, where we can have also some comments on this position, that it seems positive and compared to other positions. My greetings to all of you once again, hoping to meet with you maybe after the ICC doing its task to see the results of their work on all those facts that they will be disclosed. Thank you very much, everybody, once again, and to another meeting soon. Thank you very much. Thank you all. From my part, I would like to thank you all, you for your initiative. This is your initiative. Thank you. May God bless you. We are great honor, an honor for Tunis, Tunisia, for the Tunisia office.
All the our interpreter, Stefano, our webinar. Special thank you to Eleonora from Justice, who was very active and involved in the debate, together with Iman from the League of Arab and my assistant here in Tunisia. And
احنا قلوبنا علمت ما قصدت وإن لم
Now, of course, although we didn't hear you, now we understand you. We couldn't hear you.
So I said Eleonora, who was very involved, and together with Iman from the League of Arab States, they were working together for many weeks to prepare this webinar. And finally, my Miss Sana Rahali, who assisted me in. I hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much.
شكرا. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Aktham. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.